Namaste and welcome to Tattva Press's first live consumer panel. We are joined today by founder of Voice of Dogras, Manu Khajuria, who is also an upcoming author publishing with the Tattva Press team early next year. She's publishing a book called Mountain Goddesses, which I'm really excited to talk to you all about with Manu a bit later on in this discussion. But firstly, let me welcome Manu to the platform. Welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you, Vidhu, and great to be here and apt to say Jai Mata Di.
Yes, Jai Mata Di. Happy Navratri. How are you celebrating? How have the last 8 days now been for you?
Well, I come from Jammu region, as you've introduced. So what we do in Jammu is we fast during Navratri. So I've been fasting. So I've been eating a lot of fruits and, phool makhane, which are lotus seeds. So that's what I've been doing. And of course, praying at home. And so, yeah, that's what.
Just a quick question then. What do you call Navratri? Because my family are from the Punjab, we call them Naratte. And then I know that the Gujarati community call it Navratri. There's lots of different names. What do you call it in Jammu?
We call it Naratte too, and I guess it's because of the proximity of Punjab and Jammu region. Yeah, it's Naratte for us as well.
Nice. So tell us a little bit about how, because many of you might not know that Manu actually grew up in the east of India as well as Jammu. So can you tell us a little bit about how traditions differ in the two areas or the two regions that you've been exposed to?
Yes, Vidhu, I think I've had I was very lucky to grow up in different parts of the country. So I spent a lot of time in Eastern India. So for me, during these Navratris, if I am a typical Dogra woman fasting during these 9 days, 8 days, I'm also very Bengali because I've grown up visiting a lot of Durga Puja pandals. They have a very specific way of celebrating. They have their pratima and a lot of community gathering at these centers, at these pandals. So I've been doing that pandal hopping. And luckily I could continue doing so in London because of the vibrant Bengali associations here. And I've been visiting not only my neighborhood Durga Puja Pandal, but I've been also going elsewhere. So that's been a part of my, celebrations, and especially on the 10th day, which is the Sindoor Khela, which the Bengalis celebrate, where married women put sindoor on each other. So I just simply love the way they celebrate that. So I've been doing that. And of course, being in London, I've got a lot of Gujarati friends. So I've also done the occasional dandiya and garba.
Lovely. Oh, lovely. Yeah, I mean, for us, especially for me growing up, that's what Navratri was all about. It was about going to the local mandir, playing dandiya, garba. So I very much had a very Gujarati kind of influence in my experience of Navratri every year. It seems though, no matter where you go in India, these 9 days are for the feminine, the divine feminine Shakti. It's all about invoking that. So can you tell us a little bit about the background for those that have no idea? What is that connection with the feminine during this time?
For me, Vidhu, it was a very learned behavior initially because I grew up in a very typical Dogra Hindu household. And anything you invoke the goddess, you call out to Durga or to Shiv Bhagwan for anything, for any blessing. So initially it was a learned behavior. And then as I grew and I went into my teenage years and I had all that angst of trying to find myself, I was exposed to the very idea of Adi Shakti, that the feminine is so powerful, or the construct of power is feminine, unlike, in the Western concepts where it's very masculine. So power is a female, it is a feminine. So that was very, very empowering for me. And it became not just a learned behavior, but then it became, I did all the rituals with understanding of the reason behind it. So that's where it began for me. And as you said, in Jammu, the Jammu region is full of Shakti shrines. So wherever you go, there are these, be it cave shrines or be it shrines atop very pretty mountains, amidst pine trees. You have so many Shakti shrines that the Shakti tradition is like deeply rooted in the region, so you cannot miss it. And there is a funny story which I always mention, which is that if you go into Jammu city, there is this river called Suryaputri or Tavi, which flows across the city. It sort of divides the city into two parts. And there are many bridges connecting the two parts of the city. above the river. And from across the river, you can see these hills where sits this Bahu Fort, which is like almost 3,000 years old. And inside the Bahu Fort is goddess Mahakali, who is known as the presiding deity of Jammu and Jammu city and beyond. And anyone who crosses the bridge, you'll see like a wave of bobbing heads, because all the locals who will be crossing that bridge, and you can see that fort, you will look towards the Bahu Fort, towards Babe Wali Mata, as she's popularly known as, and you will bow your head and do a namaskar. So you can actually identify who is a non-local, because the non-local will be the only one who's not looking in the direction of the fort and bobbing his head up and down. So that's been my, what shall I say? It's a family tradition which has been passed on. And now that I understand the concept and the very empowering thought in our Vedic text, which says that every woman is a Durga, it's only natural for me to continue and, of course, pass it on to my children.
Sure. So what is the tradition of Kul Devis then? Because each family will have a Devi or a mandir that they visit that is for them, like, or that they are kind of affiliated with, or what's the word that I'm looking for? Like, you know, their connection is with that particular Kul Devi. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what the history is there?
Yeah, sure. And I think the history, or the very reason why any ordinary woman has also been deified or made into a Devi, especially as you see in Jammu region, the idea is that it is the woman, or it is the feminine power which protects you. And that's seen in these 9 nights, you know, the Puranik Katha, or the Puranic story behind these 9 nights is Durga killing Mahishasur, the buffalo demon, and the idea that the male gods and the Trinity especially could not defeat this Mahishasur. So they all got together, and their collective power, because of their collective power, Durga was created, and she is the one who defeated this demon. So this very idea that she is the protector is, I think, reflected in these Kul Devis, because almost every clan or villages, they have a Devi or a woman who has been deified, and then the village will seek for protection and her blessings for everything they do. So for example, in my village, which is in Bishnath Tehsil in Jammu district, in Bamnal, we have a Kul Devi or a Gram Devi, and before, you know, for every harvest, the first crop or the first produce is taken to her and offered to her before it's distributed, or a feast is organized in the village. Any marriage, I mean, my wedding card was first given to my Gram Devi, and her blessings were sought, and then anything was done. So you seek, she's the mother, so she's the creator, she's the nurturer, and she's also the destroyer of evil. So everything has to be done with her permission and with her blessings.
Of course. We've spoken about your book, which we haven't quite spoken about yet, but we will get around to it. But there's a really nice anecdote that you always share when you speak about your book, which is about how the soldiers in the Jammu area who will still, you know, call out to the Devis. They will still hold that, hold a Devi really close to them when they're, you know, fighting or at war. And you always sort of reference how these big macho men, but they are praying to women. Do you mind just sharing that story? Because I always just love hearing it.
Yes, because, you know, Dogras are a martial race. So in this race, as you said, very machoistic men, in this particular martial race, to find a place for yourself. And that's why it said, you know, in dharmic traditions, not everything is in the text. It's also in other sources. So to find your place in this whole context of men going into battle and wars being fought, it was very interesting for me to discover that these very brave men, one of, you know, the greatest generals who fought battles at 15,000 feet in Western Tibet and Ladakh, they have turned towards Shakti or Adi Shakti and sought her blessings. The fact that the JK State Forces, which was the force of the princely state, their slogan or their war cry is Durga Mata Ki Jai. So it's only apt, and it's very, very empowering that even the greatest of generals like General Zorawar Singh, who, you know, who conquered Ladakh, actually went to Machel Mata, which is a very, very revered shrine in Jammu region, and sought her blessings before he went for the conquest of Ladakh. So all these generals have turned to that. And because it's a martial race, we have a lot of Dogra men in the Indian Army. I have spoken to a lot of veterans, and almost all of them sort of reiterate these stories where Durga has come into play whenever there is a battle and she has protected the city, or they have sought her blessing. So let me give you an example of the Mahakali or Bave Wali Mata temple that I was referring to. The very famous legend, or it can be called an urban legend, it all depends on your faith, but everybody seems to be telling the same story in Jammu, that during the Indo-Pakistan war, when these, Pakistani PAF fighter planes were coming into Jammu city to attack it, they couldn't see anything. It was like as if there was a fog, and all they saw was a little girl in red. She was holding a lamp, and the locals believe that it was Durga, it was her manifestation, and she protected the city. Wow. So this I've heard from even veterans, like a major general has told me a story, this story. So I've found that almost all soldiers are very, very religious, and they turn towards Adi Shakti for protection.
Wow, interesting. So just on that then, why are we both wearing this beautiful red color today then? Could you share with the viewers?
Yeah, sure. I think red has always been identified as the color of Shakti or Samarthya, power, and it's associated with Durga. And, when you said what we are wearing, this is another very fascinating thing that I found in Dharmic traditions, that when you want to identify or you want to have a role model, that role model has to be identifiable, as in he or she should be speaking either the same language or be of the same culture or dress like you. So it's fascinating that our goddesses are dressed like a typical Indian woman. They are dressed in finery, they are bejeweled, they are in, the richest of silks. And especially Bave Wali Mata that I referred to, she's also wearing a Nama set, which is a very peculiar Dogra jewelry, and she's wearing a nut, the kind of nut that I have. So it just makes you, identify
Empowered.
with your... Absolutely. Yeah. Then you totally believe that, there is a Durga in me, or there is a particle of that same Shakti in me, because she looks like me. So she is my mother and I'm her daughter, or I am her son. So that identifiable factor of our goddesses is also very interesting. And I guess that's why both of us are in red today.
Well, we clearly come from a culture where we have a lot of like visual aids, everything is very sensory in terms of colors and in terms of just how we celebrate. And we've already touched on how it is, of course, a culture that, really reveres the feminine, but we also come from a culture that really respects nature. So how do we kind of bring nature into this festival? What is that sort of, are there any rituals that you're participating in at the moment that really show or symbolize our sort of alignment with nature?
Yes, again, in Jammu, what we do when we are fasting for these 9 days, we have something called Sank, which is basically we take jaw or barley seeds and we sow them on the very first day of Navratri. We water them every day when we sit and worship Durga. And then on the 9th day, when it's all over, and then you do Visarjan, or you let it flow in the river. So I think the fact is that this is all about Prakriti and Purush, because it is believed that barley or jaw was the first crop grown on earth, and it is seen as a gift from God. So in many descriptions, it is said that it is Brahma himself, that jaw that we are growing, the barley that we are growing is Brahma himself, which basically means that it is a gift. And this is what sustains us. And so when you grow this over a period of 9 days, and believe me, I have one growing in my puja ghar, and it's amazing the way the seeds have grown. They've actually broken the soil. The soil has come up. So it made me reflect how much power there is in nature. I just put it on the first day and the soil has come up. It seems as if it's got its own power. So it reminds you, and it ingrains in you a sense of gratitude. Kritagyata, which is the basic concept of all dharmic tradition, which is you have to be grateful for all the things that you've been gifted.
Lovely. And so how do you pass that message on to your daughter, who I assume, has been born and brought up here in the UK? Do you find it's quite easy to pass these traditions and these concepts on?
Yes, it's been quite easy. I would say I've been lucky, I've been blessed, because first of all, I travel to India a lot with my children. So they spend almost a month and a half every year, every summer. And other than that, we go quite often. But besides that, she's seen me practicing it. She's seen the extended family practice it. So we've been part, and thanks to digital, the aids, that we've been part of WhatsApp groups. So everybody's sharing what they are making today, when is Navami coming, and they share, Kanya Pujan pictures. So Kanya Pujan is something that I've been doing, which she has been a part of. for so many years. So she has seen that how we see the Durga in her, we see the Shakti in her. And especially very peculiar to Jammu is that we don't let our girls touch our feet.
Okay.
As a matter of, we do pranam and we touch our feet all over India. But in Jammu, you don't let your little girls do that. So
Yeah.
she's seen that. I think she's the more powerful one compared to my son in my household. So she's enjoyed the power. And there is another interesting story related to that, that I was in Jammu and there's this very famous bazaar called the Raghunath Bazaar. And we were shopping for shawls and stuff. And then a random stranger approached us. My daughter was with me and he touched my daughter's feet. He gave her a bowl of, prasad, kala chana and halwa, which is a very typical prasad for Durga. And he handed a note, to a 10 rupees note to her. And he said, no, she's Durga. Please accept this from me. This is I'm just, giving my respect to her. So she remembers this very clearly. She was like taken aback and then she was so pleased. So, in fact, she kept joking and kept telling my son that, listen, you better respect me. See, this uncle came and respected me and he did this. So yeah, so she's seen all that. So it's very easy to have, transferred the same traditions.
Yeah. I laugh because I relate, because every time we do what we call Kanjika, which is Kanya Puja, I always say to my brother, like, see, I'm the one that's respected in the house. I'm a Kanya Devi and all of that. So I've grown up doing that. So this is a really nice segue actually into, I think, what should be, a question that we've all sort of pondered on, especially in the Tattva team, is how does the Hindu idea around femininity differ from this modern, very Western notion of feminism?
Well, as I think I touched upon it when I said that the very construct of power is very feminine, and has been always. So I was reading up on feminist philosophies in the Western world and how and when they were taught. And it was only in the 1970s that you could go to a university and study feminism. But for us, it's been throughout, it's been from the prehistoric times that we've been talking about feminism. We have these role models. If you look at all these manifestations of Adi Shakti, we've always had them. So and also for a modern woman who is probably looking for a fluidity in roles. So you have Annapurna, who is sustaining her family by giving them food. You have a Parvati who's very calm and loving, and she's a great mother. And then you have someone like Saraswati, who's imparting education to her children. And then you have independent and fierce goddesses like Kali and Durga, who have a very admirable array of weapons and who go around slaying the evil. So you have all these role models in front of you. So probably Wonder Woman was a creation of it's an American fictional character. And this came up in response to the prominence of the male superheroes. But we never needed that because we already have a Mahakali and we have Durga and we have all these stories around us and so many Shakti shrines to go to and sort of remind ourselves of those stories.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we spent our childhood when we were visiting India going to Jwalaji and Chintapurni and Naina Devi and all of them. And I never really felt like it was a culture that lacked that female representation in any way. In fact, I was always quite heavily aware of it. So I'd like to allow you actually to make the announcement about your book. Can you tell us the name, what it's about, what we can expect from it? Because we're really excited in the Tattva Press team to be launching it, to be working with you on it. So please tell us, what is it all about?
Yes, it's been a very exciting journey for me. It's all about mountain goddesses, and that's what the book is about. And what I have done in my book is I have covered a lot of these Shakti shrines in Jammu region. Not all of them. There are so many. I haven't done justice to all, but I have taken some, and I've talked about not just the Puranic stories which are attached to these Shakti shrines, but also the impact it has on me or the possible messaging it has, the message it has for the society. So I've covered these mountain goddesses from Vaishno Devi to Bawegali Mata to Machel Mata, Pingala Mata, Sarthal, Sukrala Mata, all these goddesses I've covered. And then I've also looked at this very unique feature in Jammu region, which is the Kul Devis. Datis, we call them Dati. So I've also covered some of the Dati because I draw a lot of inspiration from them. There are lots of stories about women who were activists who actually fought against the feudal system or they fought against taxation, things like that, which I feel is reflected in my life because I do a lot of activism of that kind. So I draw inspiration from them. So the second section of the book covers these datis. And finally, I've also looked at warrior princesses. Being a frontier region, we've faced many invasions, and not many people, even within the Jammu region, are, or remember these warrior princesses. So, and Alexander had come up to Jammu region, and he was met with a very, very strong army. So, and there was a woman involved. There was a Mangala Rani, and there was this amazing story. I won't reveal much, but she belonged to Kishtwar. Her name is Kokila. I just simply love the story of a woman who goes into battle, and the men actually allow her to go. So the king of Kishtwar actually allowed her to go into battle, and she does slay many enemy soldiers. So yeah, the book covers this, and I think it will be an inspiration. I can see myself gifting it to my daughter and her friends, and saying that, you do not need to look further for role models. They exist within your own dharmic traditions.
Yeah, of course. And, I think you're fulfilling such a niche, such an underrepresented, untalked about area in such a saturated feminist literature market. So I'm especially excited to kind of see that launched.
But, and, Vidhu, I'd like to add one thing, especially
sure.
The one is the feminist aspect, and the other aspect is that this region has not been so visible or heard. So many of these stories are unheard because there hasn't been much exploration, though there have been some very fantastic writers who have documented these stories, but very little has come out. So if you do a Google search, it's very hard to find. So it will, I think, satisfy both these areas, a very unexplored, unheard of region, and then these feminist icons. So yes.
I can't think of more capable hands for this topic, for these stories to be in. So I have no doubt you're going to do you have already done an amazing job with them from what I've read so far. But not only mountain goddesses, you're also contributing to Tattva Press's Beyond the Bindi anthology, which is exploring Hindu ideas, British Hindu ideas, or Hindu ideas of femininity from a British Hindu lens. So what is your piece about in Beyond the Bindi?
Well, again, it looks into politics and women in politics, and women not just in politics, but activism also. Because this was another very fascinating journey for me. The essay that I have written, I begin with my own experience of having just arrived in London, and there was some protest happening related to Jammu and Kashmir, which is my home state, and I just felt the need to go. And I was very surprised with how much happens around my state in London, which I think now everyone knows. And I went and I took the megaphone and I said something that day, and I was just new to London. So I had to actually look up the map. I had to ask my husband which train to take, which tube to take. And I arrived there and I did that. And that was just the beginning. So, and then I started looking at the other women who were there. So there were so many inspirational women who had come much earlier than me, when it was even more difficult to be active, who are today counselors or active in their, various communities. And I wanted to know their story, because there is one struggle of finding a place for yourself as a Hindu, British Hindu woman, telling people that this is who you are, and yet you can integrate and you can contribute to the British society here, and then do your activism. So it's not easy. You might face, and these women I've talked to, who range from counselors to activists to writers, have gone through struggles from within or obstacles from within their community as well as outside. So I tell their stories.
I really admire that about you, because it's very easy to talk. It's very easy to just write and to be active on social media, but you're also active physically and in making change happen through Voices of Dogras. So can you tell us a little bit about what the mission is behind that?
Well, Voice of Dogras came about with because I felt a sense of voicelessness. I felt as if I wasn't being heard. And when I say I'm just an extension of my community, the Dogras from Jammu region. And again, when I say Dogra, it's more of a geography. So I refer to all the 10 districts in Jammu, and again, it's a very diverse region. So you have the Gujars and Bakarwals, and you have the Dogras, and you have so many different communities. So that region was not being represented. And I felt that if I had some sort of skill within me, which was of articulation or of writing, I should use it. I couldn't just sit back and complain and say, this is not happening or this hasn't happened. I felt I needed to change that, and the change is going to come from me. So that's how Voice of Dogras came about, and that's what it does. It not only just talks about the culture and the traditions of Jammu region, but also picks up on things where we feel that Jammu hasn't been heard or it needs to be heard. So we've picked up on those. We've created and curated a lot of seminars, and now, of course, recently a lot of webinars. We have done advocacy work. And so we are trying to give shape to a certain narrative which says that there is no single story. You need to hear us as well.
Amazing. So much going on. Just finally then, if, for those people that are watching now that want to get into learning about Hindu ideas, about, Navratri, about Shakti, about femininity from a Hindu lens, where would you tell them to start? Where would be like a starting point for them to really, start doing some serious sort of research and exploration of this area?
Vidhu, I have been very lucky because when I started exploring this, I found who I consider my guide and philosopher, Pandurang Shastri Atwale, from the Swadhyay Parivar. But I feel that we really need to, this sort of exploration is the beginning. It could lead you anywhere, but it needs to lead you to a source which is factual, which is truthful, which gives you everything, presents you with all the knowledge and all the resources, and then it lets you decide, because that's the beauty of dharmic tradition. It's the free will. It gives you everything, and then it says, now you decide, now you take your decision, and now you make an opinion. So that kind of exploration is needed, and that starts from questioning yourself or self-study, swa ka adhyayan or swadhyay, which means self-study. So when you start looking inwards, these questions arise, and then you go about exploring them. Like, I'm a mother. If I have to put my child into a school, I do so much research. I find out what the best schools are. So how can you not do it for your dharmic traditions? How can you just Google information about your dharmic tradition and just sit on it? And there is so much which is not true. I mean, I've recently seen some, campaigns around Navratri, which are definitely quite disappointing and revolting, to be truthful. So you really need to counter that misinformation with correct information, and that information will begin from my own, from your own personal search of what
your
is
own curiosity, really.
Yeah, and one simple thing could be just talking to your elders. So that's one source, that you talk to your elders, you understand what the traditions are, the reason behind those rituals, and then carry it forward. And it's our duty to pass it on to our children, of course.
And I'm sure that sort of earnest exploration is what we can expect to find in Mountain Goddesses.
Yes, it reflects my own self-exploration. Hopefully others will find it interesting too.
Yeah, sure. So you heard it here first, guys. We are launching Manu Kajuria's Mountain Goddesses early next year. So you'll be able to find that on the Tattva social media pages, the website. If you'd like to follow Manu's work, you can follow her. Okay, I've got to get this right. On Twitter, @Kajuria Manu. On Instagram, mkajuriajk. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
I feel like a bit of a stalker now. And Manu Kajuria on Facebook. She's the founder of the Voice of Dogras platform, which you can also find on all social media platforms. But I'm sure we're going to be doing lots of events and talks and lots of that sort of stuff coming up over the next couple of months as we promote the book. So please keep your eyes peeled, please engage, please get in touch, please help us sort of, shape these narratives, contribute to that conversation, because I think that's where and especially for a lot of us in the Tattva team, that's sort of where it all starts, when you get a community together and you have a real earnest exploration and discussion about a topic, and then we found that magical things seem to happen when you get people motivated and together like that. So thank you so much for joining us this evening, Manu, and I'm sure this won't be the last that we hear from you.
Thank you, Vidhu. Thank you, Tattva.
Happy Navratri, and I hope to see more photos of your niece and your family celebrating. I hope you have a lovely Durga Puja as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Jai Mata Di.
Jai Mata Di.